this is my third time doing this, and I don't care if it doesn't work this time, I'm just going to edit it. So, getting straight into it, literature. What is literature defined as? Text with significant social value. It can be poetry, plays, novels, short stories, films, basically anything. I'm just going to talk about some texts that are relevant across time, culture, all those things. First one is Of Mice and Men that we studied in class. The reason this one's relevant is not only because the themes are still relevant today, such as desire, to want what you can't have, isolation, loneliness, power, powerlessness, noble, friendship over society standards, abuse, and ignorance and innocence, the juxtaposition of the two. It's relevant because the meaning behind it, basically the meaning, or one of them, is your plans can be shot to hell with crumbling hope. As with the poem that John Steinbeck based his novella on. I'm going to compare this to another text that I actually really love called The Foxhole Court. It deals with some of the similar themes, such as desire, isolation, loneliness, power, powerlessness, abuse, innocence, ignorance. It also deals with friendship, family, tragedy, reality, betrayal, identity, manipulation, pride, and pride. But the meaning behind it isn't as significant. Well, it is a significant meaning, and due to it being published in around 2012-2013, the actual series, which is called All for the Game, Foxhole Court is the first one. We don't know whether it's going to be literature or not because it hasn't been 10 years and it's in the past, but it doesn't really have that much value to society, so it might not be one. So, second actual relevant one that I'm going to talk about, if I can get the page, is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, written in the 18th century. It is basically about the French Revolution, and a group of people within that. The reason why it's still relevant is not only because the themes like love, redemption, mercy versus judgment, justice, injustice, history, revolution, and progress, obviously, mystery, knowledge, suffering, family, poverty, youth, appearances, religion, human rights, class conflict, and the meaning of life, is because Les Mis is a book, as I said, about the French Revolution, but it's also about a guy named Jean Valjean who has committed a crime that he didn't see as a crime, justice, injustice, and he gets sentenced to life in prison for it. He sold his bread, for reference, and he gets set free, and this cop named Javert spends the rest of his life trying to find him. And the fact that decent, honest people are still being exploited today is part of why it never stopped being relevant, because people nowadays are still being exploited despite being decent and honest people. Not only that, but poverty. As long as poverty exists, Les Mis will forever be relevant, since that is one of the most common main themes in the book that the book explores. It's basically just about poverty during the French Revolution. I don't really have one to compare this one to, but the next one, Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, honestly. Any poets from olden time, I love. So Romeo and Juliet, some of the themes explored in it are fate, love, gender, tragedy, individual versus society, youth, awesomeness of love, conflict, and temptation. Now, the reason this is so relevant, not only because of themes like every other one that I'm going to talk about and have spoken about, but because it teaches you that love allows you to become your truest self, and it teaches you not to make rash decisions based on passion, but to be patient and rational. If you don't know what Romeo and Juliet's about now, what life have you been living? You've obviously been under a rock for a few hundred years. But the reason why that's so relevant is because, all of that's relevant. How is it not? Love is still a very relevant thing in our world. But, unfortunately, again, another series that I love, or book that I love, I'm comparing it to, called Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli, published in 2015. It got a movie early 2018, so early this year, called Love, Simon. About a guy named Simon Spear, gay. He meets a guy online or through email named Blue, falls in love with him, story, him and Blue not knowing each other's identities, finding each other's identities, him being outed, all that stuff. Now, it does explore some similar themes like love, relationships, friendships, secrecy. It also explores society. Do I have any more notes on the other page? And family and homophobia. And it teaches us to embrace our truths. But the reason why this one may never be relevant to in years to pass is because it's your typical average love story that came after Romeo and Juliet. It's your typical person falls in love with a person, doesn't want the person to know kind of thing. Well, I don't know how to explain it. But unlike Romeo and Juliet, it hasn't had an impact on the world aside from a lot of people finally being accepted for their sexualities. So it could be. It hasn't been out for 10 years, so we don't really know. So the last relevant one that I'm going to talk about is The Everlasting Awesomeness of Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. Now, this is one of my favourite Shakespeare plays, honestly. It's about a boy and a girl that fall in love, and there's a lot of mistaken identities and just a lot of conflict that is very unneeded and unnecessary, and you find out in the end that it's all for nothing. One of the lessons learned in the, well, what it teaches, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in it, but one of the main ones that I found, and that's more relevant to me, is that not all love is the same. Where Hero and, I can never remember his names, love was sweet and kind, Benedict and Beatrice's love was said through fighting. That is very relevant in today's society where every relationship is different and every relationship will forever be different. Well, romantic relationship and friendship, all of that. It also explores the themes of the ideal of social grace, which I don't know if that's still relevant today, probably is. I don't keep up with times. Deception, importance of honour, which is still very relevant. Misunderstandings, misplaced identities, love and family, all of which will forever be relevant. Now, the one that I'm wanting to compare this to isn't very similar to it. It's another one of my favourite series. Because I like to torture myself and put them in the irrelevant list. Called the Raven Cycle series. It's composed of 4 books written by Maggie Stiefvater. Steve. I never like to pronounce her name, I'm sorry. It's basically about a girl named Blue who has been told that she is... Oh, this can actually be compared to Romeo and Juliet as well. She's been told that if she kisses her true love, he'll die. Basically, she's a psychic. And she meets her true love, hates him, hates them all, befriends them all, because she hates boys. She befriends them all. It's awesome. It's a great trilogy series. And it does teach a good lesson. It teaches many, actually, throughout the whole thing. Each book has a different side of the lesson to learn. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it explores the themes of friendship, family, mortality, not as in death, well, kind of as in death, but being mortal and immortal. It explores that. Fate and free will and society and class. So it can be compared to almost any of the books that I have put into this list. Oh my god, I can't speak. But basically, the reason why I don't think this one is going to still be relevant is because although it does teach some very valuable lessons, they aren't ones that are going to be, well, that will be relevant. Every lesson learned will always be relevant, but it will get less and less relevant in times. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm just going to leave that there because I've lost words. Also things like Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, I also want to touch on those very quickly and say they are probably classified as literature, even though I don't, well, anything can be classified as literature. I mean, Harry Potter and The Hunger Games are classified as literature. Obviously, Harry Potter, well, they both had a very big impact on society, but they're not ones that you'd expect to be literature. Like, I didn't expect Harry Potter to actually get that big, if you want all honesty. So, concluding this, the main question to answer was about the degree of relevancy that books and literature can have. Well, to what degree can they have a shelf life? And I do think that some books will forever be relevant. Some texts, I should really not say books. Some pieces of literature will always be relevant. For example, Shakespeare, his stuff will always be relevant. Same with Les Mis will forever be relevant. Same with, probably with Mice and Men. Just all the words explored will always be relevant, but I do think to a degree they become less and less relevant as times go on. In saying that, anything can become relevant. You never know what's gonna be relevant in 10, 15 years. I don't know words, I'm sorry. So anyway, after my third time filming this, let's hope this works. Hope you like that. I apologise for my existence.